event. Perfect, we are live. So thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Niels for coming today. Now let's wait.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. Let's wait for a couple of seconds until everyone arrives. And meanwhile, let me introduce you, Niels, okay? We met through a growth hacking group. It's kind of an underground Facebook group, as I found. And I found a truly amazing lead magnet created by you. And it was about how to automate prospecting and how to have great results. So unlike everyone, who sends cold emails and never get a reply, this document showed me how to do it step by step from the very beginning until you get positive response. And the reason why I admire you is not just because you get great results, but it was a very, very clear and concise way how you communicated this. And this is why I wanted to interview you and show it to our audience. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, great.
So one question I have for the audience, I know there's quite a few of you in here already. To sort of tailor my presentation slightly to you guys, how many, if you can say in chat, how many paying customers does your company have right now? I'm curious. If you can type that in chat, that would be awesome. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries, that's fine. I think I write it into the chat because we might have a few seconds of delay between us and our audience, so it's just better to make sure that they can also see discussion. So 100, about 50. Eric says about 2,000. Yakin says about 50. Aryan says about 100. Kata says about 100. So yeah, Boyko, he or she says about 2. So I think it's
that's also an exciting phase.
yes, that's a very, very it's a different phase than having 2,000.
20, so quite a wide spread from 2 until 2,000. Okay.
I see that Boyko just right. He meant 20, not 2, but well. Okay.
All right. Should we? Smiley face. Do you have more questions? Should we start with the presentation?
Yes. What if I ask the question, but of course you can take the lead anytime and you can present, because I know that you are prepared for this webinar, and I want to show everybody what's his next step. So if you start from how do you do your preparation, that would be amazing.
How do I do prepare for what do you mean?
To the entire outreach process.
Well, I think one thing that really helps me is sort of getting a list of all your paying customers and then just listing all of them. I know Aaron has 873, so he knows very specifically. And then sort of looking at the different patterns in your customers, like is there the same are all the companies the same size? Who are the decision makers? Sort of make a list of the company name, their vertical, the company size, and whatever sort of patterns or characteristics that you can think of. And then also listing the decision makers and everyone who's involved in the decision making process, and see if there is some sort of pattern in there. I know, for example, if you're targeting hotels, we did it one time, then you have general managers, revenue manager, front office managers. It's very specific, like 3 people that you need to talk to. One of them is responsible, so you just need to find out who that is. So that's sort of where I start to get a clear sense of who you're targeting. That's, I guess, step 1. Then step 2, if you want to do outbound, you have to source your data somewhere. And that also starts with that list of who you're targeting. And then you can, of course, buy the data. There's providers that you can just buy it off the shelf, or you can scrape something yourself or source it in a different way. All of it depends on your company.
All right. Can I ask you about the mindset? Because I think for many people, cold emails or outbound seems spammy, and they are kind of terrified from outreaching.
Yeah, I get that a lot. There's people sometimes afraid that it's illegal to do.
Yes.
I think that highly depends on your country where you do it. And even then, it all depends on who you write to. Is your message appropriate for the person that you write to? Does it add value to them? Is it targeted? If you just are sending something that nobody wants, then it will just come across as spammy. But if you actually add value to them, or did research about them and have some insights or understand them, then people are very willing to talk back to you. I think the type of campaigns that get 2 or 5% response rate, that's more where the targeting or the messaging, one of the two, is not done well enough.
Yes, actually, this was the main thing which I loved in your approach, that you focus on these and not really on what are the tools they use to send out the emails. So if you do, just to repeat what you've said, if you do your homework properly, so if you deep research your audience and your offer is really kicking serious butt, then I would say you have a much higher response rate, right?
Yeah, I think so too. And what I do there is the best copywriting comes from your customers themselves. So that means interviewing them. I know a lot of salespeople that never talk to a paying customer. They just try and talk to new customers. And I think every salesperson should at least interview a couple of the people who are actually paying for the service, so they understand their fears, their worries, what they need, and all those answers have a list of interview questions that we can also send to everyone who attended here. It takes 40 minutes. Just interview them, get them on the phone. Do not email it to them because they will just write very short answers, and it's actually about asking them questions, and then when they answer, following up with those questions. Like when someone says, "Yeah, I got a lot of value from your product," that's not very interesting to know. So you just have to ask a follow-up question: what was the actual value? Because this is what happens. I've tried emailing these questions to customers, but it just didn't work. You have to get them on the phone, get them to spend 30, 40 minutes with you, and just ask a series of about 15 questions. And again, we can send them those to you. And those answers will be your perfect copywriting for email templates.
Yes.
Because if you do like 3 or 5, you'll start to see patterns. Like people say the same things over and over again. They may use words that you don't even know they use, but your target audience always uses. And if you make that part of your copywriting, people will just feel like you understand them, that you're one of them,
Yes.
and that makes it more likely that they will respond.
That's amazing. Just to clarify to our audience, it's not about cold calling. It's about calling your existing clients or those who already pays for your service, right?
Yeah, people who paid for your service and who are happy with your service.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Can I ask if you go deeper on this? How do you define your best companies and your best decision makers? Do you have any process to come up? Who do you want to target?
I mean, like I said, I think that depends on who you already sold to. If you have a certain vertical like insurance or hotels that you've already sold to a lot, then I would start there and sort of make a list of every company in the world or in a certain country that could buy your services.
I like this approach.
Yeah, sometimes people underestimate the amount there is, and sometimes they grossly overestimate how many companies can actually use them. So that's where I start, just having that whole list in in an Excel or in a Google Sheet. And then you can also sort of divide your resources based on that. If you have, say, 20,000 in a certain country, then and you have 2 salespeople, then you sort of have very few salespeople for a lot of companies. So you can actually automate more, or try and you can automate more and send more automatic types emails. But if you have 1 salesperson and only 100 companies that could potentially use your service, then it makes a lot of sense to highly personalize every email or every LinkedIn message that you send out, because there's just so few. like you can press send on those 100 companies tomorrow, and then next week you're out of leads. And I've seen that happen. So it depends on your total addressable market, as they call it, and then the resource that you have, and sort of finding a way to maximize maximize those. I think, like Aaron says here in chat, there's 50,000 hotels in the US, 22,000 are independent. Yeah, I think that sounds about right. And creating lists of hotels is an interesting one. I also did that a year ago, where I was trying to scrape Booking.com for a while, and then I learned that Booking sends an entire database of every hotel they have on the website to their affiliates. It's like a 1 gigabyte file, and you have all hotels.
Oh, sorry.
Then you have all hotels in the world in just in a database, and they send it out to you every month. I believe you can email me, Aaron, if you need that list. I can still get that to you.
Yes.
And also, maybe that's time for a disclaimer that sometimes scraping websites is illegal, and you should always look at the terms and conditions of a website, or
yes,
when you source data, it may not be allowed to do it.
Yes,
you can still do it, but for this webinar, we have to tell you to be careful.
Yes, thanks, Niels. Yeah, I just asked Niels to be very so be very clear with the disclaimer on the webinar. So of course you can do it as you wish. Can I ask more about this? I have two main questions in support, which I usually receive. The first one is those who haven't sent out any cold email yet, and they just receive lots of leads, and they don't know how to handle it, like how to start this entire process.
How to start the entire process. I think one thing that's very important is to always put your cold email on a different domain. Most people don't, because if, for example, you make a mistake and you send out 1,000 emails in a day, you can mess up your domain where you get flagged as a spammer, and all your regular business email will also be affected by that. So that's one thing to always do, is just register a separate domain, put put Gmail on there, and have it refer to your main domain, just as a safety measure.
Yes.
That's one step to take. If you're sending very low volume, then of course you don't need to. But if you start sending like 50, 100 a day, then you for sure should do this. If you have a larger team, then definitely do this. I also have a guide for that. If anyone wants it, then just send me a message.
Yeah, sure.
So that's where to start. I would start with listing all your customers that you have, and then sourcing a data list. And that can either be, if like with hotels, there's a website like Booking.com that has a list of all of them.
Yes.
Or you can use LinkedIn as a source and say, well, insurance between 1,000 and 5,000 employees, and just use that as a list. So having that company list first, that with certain characteristics. Then the next step is getting the right contacts of those people. I think most industries that we're targeting will often be well represented on LinkedIn. So I think that's most of the time that's the best source. That's the best source. But for example, with hotels, a lot of them are not on LinkedIn yet. So
yes,
there's a better database, in this case Booking, where you can find more of them. Or if you're targeting sort of small businesses, that can be found on Yelp or even on Google Maps, for example, then that's a better source. We recently did yoga studios in Germany, and there's websites, German website, that have every yoga studio in Germany. So it's just searching in your country or in your on your continent maybe. What is a good source for that?
Right.
That's sort of the basic steps that I would take, and then picking the 5 customers that really love you, assuming that you have them that really love you, and that will happily do a 30 to 40 minute interview. asking those questions and then writing email templates. That's sort of the steps that I would take.
Right. And how about, let me ask, if you, for example, what's the difference if you want to scale up? So let's say you have an entire sales team and you have divided marketing and sales team, or if you're a solopreneur or you do your business like 1 or 2 person.
Yeah, good question. I think as your team grows, I know a lot of founders that I work with just don't. They're like a small team with like 3 or 4 people or 5, maybe 10. It's all about resource allocation. So if you have very little time, then you can automate more. And if you have a large target group, then you should automate more. But if you have a whole sales team, then those salespeople can spend time on personalizing, spend more time on personalizing. And I think as a sales team, what I often don't see, I think the biggest thing is often that a sales team doesn't have a prospect list where on Monday the sales guy comes in and then there's like, well, who are we going to call today or who will we email today?
I see.
On average, a lot of those salespeople spend 1 or 2 days of their week sort of prospecting and figuring out who they will email or call. So if you have a sales team, then definitely get that sorted where you give every salesperson a couple hundred leads every month for them to work on. Because then they will spend more time on what they're good at, and that is selling to people. And they don't need to do sort of a $5 an hour job that you can just outsource to India or some other on Upwork. Because there's people that will find your emails for $3 an hour, and I think most of our sales employees will be much more expensive than $3 an hour, right?
Yes, especially if they are good. So, is there any specific step you recommend if someone wants to scale up?
Scale up from.
So let's say one you just mentioned that dividing prospecting and actually personalizing and selling. Is there
Okay.
anything?
Yeah, I think you can divide up sort of the meeting scheduling and the closing of deals, where you have people responsible who just their responsibility is to book meetings for you or for someone else. Most United States companies, and again, I'm not sure if this is something that all of you know, but the role is called SDR, so sales development rep. So, for example, if you're a founder and you sold a bunch of you've sold to a bunch of companies, you're ready to make your first sales hire. That first sales hire can just their responsibility can be to book meetings in your calendar with prospects, which is a simpler task. It's a bit repetitive, but it's sort of an entry level job where they need to book 5 or 10 meetings in your calendar every week. They get to learn the market, how to communicate to customers. They can attend those meetings where you try to close the deals as well, and they sort of learn. And then after 3 to 6 months, you make them responsible to also close deals. They've had their training, and then they're ready to go. So I think to scale, I think that's a good sort of difference between people who schedule meetings and people who close deals. I think it's called like sales development reps or account executives, usually in the United States.
Nice.
So I can also show some stuff in the presentation because I have some things to
This is
show.
my next question. I know you're prepared with the
You
presentation.
guys enjoy this. I think we have another 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And if you guys have questions, also just post them in chat, and I'll try and answer them in a couple minutes. Okay. Let's see. Does this work?
Yes, I can see that.
You can see it? Okay, cool.
How about yours in the chat?
So I think you guys can see this presentation, right?
I barely need a few seconds until they hear it. Yes, we can see it. Davis wrote. Perfect.
Right. So I mean, one common thing, you have to sell or your company will die, and I think that's such an important thing to know. To sell, you need to speak to potential customers. And one thing, a friend of mine was in Y Combinator, a very well-known accelerator, and he said two things they ask every week: how much product did you build last week, and how many potential customers did you speak to last week? And I think those are very important questions to ask. And I often hear founders say, "Well, I just spoke to like 2 potential customers last week," and that is just not enough to sort of survive as a company. So always ask yourself this question, and I think for a lot of people this answer is way too low. It should be more like 10, 15, or 20, as much as you can possibly speak to. Also, I think a lot of you guys have quite a few customers already, but the earlier you are, the more it's also extremely important to just start emailing people and test your assumptions if you sold to very few people. Here's a test that we recently did for this company who wanted to partner with yoga studios. So we found a list of about 3,500 in Germany. We emailed 64 as a test, and eight replied positively to get a call. That's 13%
Nice.
that went to a call. And this took like just a couple hours of effort. And if we scale this to the entire country, we'll get 400 calls like this. And the total cost was just 50 euros for a list, 350 for emails, and 50 euros for a tool. So that's how quickly you can do this. It's important to start emailing, because then you get feedback. Here's just a screenshot from one day where you start learning, talking to your users, get you feedback. Like this is someone saying in German, your website doesn't work with Firefox, but it has been online for a year. So the earlier you are, it's also important to just start emailing. I think we talked about this 4 key parts to a successful outbound campaign. You have to get your domain set up, put it on a separate domain, register a new one. You have to target the right companies and the right people. You have to have good copywriting, and your follow-up also needs to be right. But just getting that first call is one thing, but then you also need to be able to close it and just keep it moving forward. So these 4 things, if one of them is bad, then the whole thing just falls apart or doesn't work. So make sure to have these 4 figured out.
Yes. Here, let me mention what I learned from you actually is that the first goal is just to set up the appointment or meeting. I know for a few of you it might be very basic, but for many of you it might be not. I still receive emails asking, can I sell for the first email? And it's like they want to sell without building a relationship or without sending these follow-ups which you're just showing us. And I think your method is extremely good.
Yeah, and I think the main point of emails is just to start a conversation, to get people somewhat interested. I mean, you can't sell them on the first email. You can just start by saying, is this interesting to you? And have them reply and start that conversation. That's far more important than just to close the deal on the first email.
Yes.
I think these are the sort of steps that I also mentioned earlier was, the steps are finding a directory with your whole target group, scrape the directory, getting it into an Excel. You have to prepare your list, like getting the names of people and the emails. Then interview your current or potential customers. If you've sold to 0 in a certain vertical, you can also interview them first. If you have paying customers, interview 3 to 5 of them, and make that into your email templates, and then just launch your campaign and start testing. Here's Upwork. I hope that most of you know, but that's where you can source your data from, having people find emails or copy paste things, or have people build scrapers for certain websites. Amazing resource. If you need specific help how to hire people, just send me a message and I can send you some guides that I made how to select people. This is one of the earlier attempts where I here's a difference between interviews and no interviews, where on this certain airline campaign we just increased our conversion by 10 or 13 times just by doing interviews and changing a couple small things in the copywriting. All the rest was the same, we just did interviews and changed a couple sentences in email copywriting, and the difference, as you can see, is massive. So it's worth it. Here's the sort of interview question that I talked about. So people buy from emotion, and then they reason with logic. So you have to ask them, like, what did you desire from hiring us? What did you fear most when hiring us? There's sort of objections, and you can incorporate those in the email copywriting. What their frustrations are, what their problems are. Sort of these desire, fear, and frustrations. These are sort of emotions that people feel about a certain situation, about their job, about their current technology that they're using. You have to find those and use that in your email copywriting. Another question to always ask, and very few people do this, is based on what you know about us, do you know anyone else who can use our service? And they just
I
ask
like
you
this.
for those referrals. I've had people just literally give me 4 names and phone numbers that I could call from doing interviews, and these are potential customers. So very valuable to do this. A couple copywriting things is I like to show this sheet. This is the space that you have to convince someone that it's worth it to talk to you. So these 3 or 4 sentences that you have in an email, they should be very good. So they should be exactly what your target audience wants or desires, or they need help with. So that's about the space that you have. So be mindful of what you put there. So these are some things that I see happening, like someone emailing me with a Gmail email address, saying that the SEO top page on this is obvious, like from some Eastern Asian country. They don't use my first name, stuff like that. So this is a better way of doing it. Sort of 3 parts of a template, sort of an introduction, value proposition, couple sentence. This was from last year. I actually think this is on the long side. You can do even less. And then the social proof, like customers you have in their certain vertical, sort of as parts of an email.
Let me mention that we still have time, so you don't need to rush. I misunderstood, I think, your question. We have this webinar for an hour, so you can go on. But meanwhile, do you mind if I ask the question of our audience?
Yeah,
for example.
let's do it.
Okay, Eric asked, I have a very specific target audience. I want to target apps that do something with photography or their users, like Facebook or Polar Steps. What would be a good way to develop a list for this?
I think also start is, do you want the iPhone or the Apple or Android users? That's a question that comes up with me. I've never targeted apps before, but I'm sure you can generate top 100,000 apps. I have heard of someone who did that, just creating that list of apps, and then I think there must be a directory out there that has this, just generating that whole list, and then either searching for keywords in the description, or just you can also just hire someone on Upwork to sort of filter through those apps and see which ones use have something to do with photos, and which ones don't. That's sort of my short answer there. I think there must be a place on the internet that has a list of the most popular million apps or so.
Great. Jose asked, could you share that presentation? I think yes, we will share the presentation which Niels shows us today, and we also give his contact or LinkedIn profile, so you can reach out and ask specific questions if you want. Sorry, Niels, just go ahead with your presentation.
I'll drop my LinkedIn profile here, so you can message me for the presentation. I believe this recording will also be sent to everyone.
Yes.
Here's another question from
Yes.
Jose. We also have a specific target: financial companies and insurances. See no problem with the creation of the leads. However, we've been struggling on the follow-up because they only say that the directors are still reviewing our service proposal. What could be a good way to accelerate this process? Yeah, it's sort of hard to answer from this. Like, how many do you have this challenge, so to say? Is it just one or a few? One thing to try and do is, did you speak to the director? Did you have the director in the meeting itself? It's always best to get that that person, the budget owner, in the meeting as often as you can, because if you have a meeting with someone that is not the decision maker or doesn't decide on the budget, then it will be much harder.
Yes.
Always try and get that person in the meeting with you some way.
Yes. Let me also mention just an idea which usually helps me. In this case, I start to follow the company, and if anything happens within the company, then you use it as a trigger. For example, hey, I just see that you hired a new sales department, so this is the reason why I'm reaching out, because our proposal in your hands is actually a great solution for that issue. So actually, you can also use personalization as a and also events in the company life as a trigger to move things ahead.
I definitely like that for setting up meetings. I also think you should always set clear next steps. So if you send them the proposal, then you also write to them. Just make sure you have a date where they come back to you. Say, well, at the end of that proposal meeting, you should say something like, all right, looks like we are pretty sure that we want to work together. Let's just set a next date. Just also always need to set a next step. To me, it seems a little bit like you guys sent this proposal and then wait for them to come back. But that next meeting should already be in the calendar. Should already have that booked, where a week or two after the proposal was sent, you should have a 30 minutes or an hour or meeting booked to talk about the proposal and about the next steps.
Yeah, that's a very smart move.
Yeah. Anything else? I think we are at our 30 minutes now.
We can go on if you want to finish the presentation. Just go ahead. Or
I have to go myself pretty soon.
Okay. Then thank you very much for sharing these smart ideas, and I will make sure that everyone receives your slides and also your LinkedIn availability. And thanks again. And if you guys have any other question to Niels, then please just reach out, and I will make sure you will get connected. So thanks again, Niels, for coming.
Thanks, guys. It was fun doing this. If you have questions, just you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can send the presentation there as well. I don't know if we have your emails.
Yeah, sure, we will have. So thank you. I see many of you say also thanks. So thanks again, and goodbye. See you next time.
Good day. See ya.